Story 1. There were many in the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. It always reminded me of the hell that soldiers and other personnel go through in or near a war zone. Story 2. Homer Simpson stares up at the stars after a tearful goodbye to his mom. Story 3. The end of Blackadder Goes Forth made me cry. George says, "I am scared, sir." And Baldric replies, "Me too, sir." To go from laughing about German spies and Baldric's amazing poetry to this scene is heartbreaking. Story 4. At the end of Dinosaurs, they cause an environmental catastrophe that creates a global winter, leading to the mass extinction of dinosaur life and the deaths of all the characters. Story 5. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan. It spun in. There were no survivors. I'm so excited and I just can't hide it. Also, Marshall's father died on How I Met Your Mother. Story 6. How I Met Your Mother, Marshall's father. And later in the series, when Barney is upset about his dad not living up to the image he had in his head. Barney angry. "I am never going to see my dad again." Marshall, "No, Barney. I am never going to see my dad again." Story 7. Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. One episode burned into my memory is when Hawkeye was talking with a therapist about the time he and a bus full of civilians were hiding and trying to be quiet. A woman was holding a chicken, and Hawkeye kept telling her to be silent. You hear the chicken clucking, then silence, implying the woman had killed it. At the end, it is revealed she was cradling a baby, not a chicken. All these years later, I still get choked up thinking about it. Story 8. When Mr. Burns puts up a sign that says, "Do not forget you are here forever." Homer covers some letters with pictures of Maggie, so the sign reads, "Do it for her." As a father who works more than 45 hours a week at the office and then spends similar time at home supporting my children, that helps when I am burned out and wishing for a break. Story 9. WKRP in Cincinnati. The station promotes a concert, and many staff attend with complimentary tickets. Everyone is excited and has a good time. The next morning, they learn that 11 people were killed in a stampede before the concert began. A similar incident had occurred a few months earlier at a concert by The Who in the city. They must deal with survivors' remorse and guilt for promoting the show. They handle it very well, considering the program is a comedy. Story 10. Where do you think you are right now? Scrubs knew how to hit. Story 11. When Jackie was beaten by her boyfriend on Roseanne, it really resonated with me. Story 12. The last episode of the first series of Dairy Girls is the juxtaposition of these kids having fun while another dreadful bombing occurs. Then the Cranberries start singing, and I am in pieces every time. Story 13. In The Good Place, when Eleanor sees her mother being a great mom to a little girl, you see her heart shatter as she comes to terms with the fact that it is not a scam. Story 14. I had Seymour until he was 3. That is when I knew him and when I loved him. I pick up Seymour's fossil. I will never forget him, but he forgot me a long time ago. Story 15. When Diane's cat died in Cheers, she talked about being a lonely child and having Elizabeth, the cat, as her companion, saying, "That cat could really keep a secret." Story 16. Howard Wolowitz learned about his mother's sudden death in The Big Bang Theory. It was also a great Sheldon moment, when everyone worried he would say something insensitive. Instead, Sheldon let Wolowitz know that he had friends to help him through it. Story 17. Rick Sanchez is attempting to kill himself while Chaos, Do You Feel It? Plays in the background. Story 18. Frasier is desperate to get a Christmas toy his son will like. He is bad at buying gifts. At the end, there is a serious moment when Dad and Frasier have a heartfelt talk about gift giving. Dad gives Frasier a present that turns out to be perfect for Frasier's son. The son says, "Dad, it's just what I wanted." Story 19. Edith Bunker and the attempted sexual assault. Archie realizing Edith has died. Hawkeye watching the chicken get smothered. Punky Brewster possibly being sent to an orphanage. Arnold Jackson and the Man on a Bicycle. Story 20. Futurama has a few. One that really hit home was when Fry discovers the truth about his brother in The Luck of the Fryish. It is probably the first instance in the series that shows the impact Fry's disappearance had on his family. Story 21. Steve Carell's last episode of The Office outside the finale hit me deeply. Michael leaving without telling anyone he would not be there the next day, and Jim telling him he was a great boss and friend and that they would meet for lunch were very moving. Story 22. Bojack spoke about how he keeps messing things up even when he wants to do better. That wasn't a cartoon anymore. That was therapy. Story 23. Chandler, my wife? She's a mother without a baby. Story 24. Ted Lasso's first on-screen panic attack. The way that moment was depicted was brilliantly real and hit me hard with my own similar struggles. Story 25. In How I Met Your Mother, many people mention Marshall's dad, and rightfully so. But for me, it is the episode in which Barney, having finally learned who his father is invited to dinner with him and his new family. Barney spends the entire meal growing more bitter and jealous until he finally storms out, leading to this exchange. You're lame, okay? You're just some lame suburban dad. Why does that make you so angry? Because if you were going to be some lame suburban dad, why couldn't you have been that for me? Story 26. In the final scene of Boy Meets World, alone in his classroom, Mr. Feeney says, "I love you all. Class dismissed." Story 27. When Michael shows up at Pam's art show and buys her painting of the Dunder Mifflin building. Story 28. I'm not ready for this. When Lily tells Marshall that his dad passed away in How I Met Your Mother, I cry every time I watch it. Story 29. Superstore is such a fun, goofy, light-hearted show. Then Mateo is arrested and deported by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The sudden shift in tone from funny to a gut punch always sticks with me, especially in 2025. Heartbreaking scene. Story 30. The WKRP in Cincinnati episode about 13 deaths caused by a crowd rush at a concert by The Who. Story 31. The Mobile Army Surgical Hospital from the patient's perspective. There was no laugh track or background music. It remained full of wisecracks, and the absence of music intensified the tone. Story 32. The dart game in Ted Lasso is beautiful and powerful. Story 33. In Full House, there is an episode early on where Jesse is looking at pictures of his deceased sister, and you can see all the emotions on his face. The happiness of the memories mixed with immense grief. Then Danny, his brother-in-law, joins him in his grief and acknowledges that it might be even worse for Jesse because he had known her all his life. I cannot watch that scene without bawling my eyes out. Story 34. In the sitcom Roseanne, Jackie's boyfriend physically assaults her, and Dan goes to his house and severely beats him, resulting in the police arriving and arresting Dan. Story 35. Andy from The Office said that he wished there was a way to know you are in the good old days before you have actually left them. Story 36. The countdown episode of How I Met Your Mother is goofy and features a fun scavenger hunt for the numbers. Then Marshall learns that his father has died, and the episode ends with him breaking down and saying, "I'm not ready for this." Story 37. Selma's death on Night Court left Bull inconsolable. He ended the show screaming her name. Because she had died in real life, many of the emotions were genuine. Story 38. I don't need him. Why doesn't he want me, Uncle Phil? Fresh Prince got me that one. Story 39. The television series Mobile Army Surgical Hospital was full of them. Its finale stands out the most. Story 40. Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. On the bus with the chickens. It wasn't a chicken. Story 41. You will all think I am nuts, but at the end of the first Dungeons & Dragons episode of Community, Neil confesses to Pierce that it was the best campaign he had ever played and thanks him. Story 42. In The Big Bang Theory, when Howard's mom dies, the emotions are real because the actress who played her had actually died. It was a hard episode to watch. Story 43. Archie Bunker's Place, Season 2, Episode 1. When Edith dies, it feels like losing a member of your own family. Story 44. It is recent, but Ted Lasso has many memorable moments. Roy hugging Jamie, and Ted and Rebecca telling stories about their fathers. Story 45. Let's Go Canadian. Trailer Park Boys. Ms. Peterson's dog. Julian is so nice to her. Kenny versus Spenny. Kenny finally turns the cameras off when Spenny is clearly way too messed up from the acid Kenny slipped him. Story 46. Family Ties. Alex Keaton sees a psychiatrist after his friend dies. Story 47. In the King of the Hill episode where Cotton dies, Hank says, the entire Japanese army could not take him out. And he adds that he will recover from his injuries. My uncle had multiple heart attacks and other health problems, so I had a similar attitude and did not want to believe he was terminal when his cancer spread to his brain. Story 48. Roseanne watches Dan discreetly grab his coat and walk out the door after learning what happened to Jackie. Story 49. Jim declares his love for Pam, and she turns him down in the United States version of The Office. Story 50. The episode Kenny Dies stands out. For a show that treated his death as a running joke, the creators flipped it completely and handled it with real emotion. There is no punchline or instant reset. The boys actually deal with losing him. Caught me off guard, especially coming from South Park. Story 51. On Saturday Night Live, Kate McKinnon sang Hallelujah after Leonard Cohen died. Story 52. Bob Newhart wakes up from a strange dream in which he is an innkeeper. Story 53. Scrubs has two for me. When Brendan Fraser's character dies and when Laverne dies. Story 54. Bob's Burgers is great at having wacky episodes, and then suddenly they present serious episodes that hit you emotionally. They can be very relatable. My top 5 in no particular order. 1. They slug horses, don't they? Sisterly squabbles and love. 2. The Amazing Rudy, a child's perspective on divorced parents. 3. Amelia struggles of finding a hero and what that truly means. 4. The plight before Christmas, sibling love, and juggling the holidays from a parent's perspective. 5. Show Mama from the grave loss of a loved one. Story 55. The Sesame Street episode following the death of Mr. Hooper, in which they explain to Big Bird that he is not coming back, is more heartbreaking than All in the Family or any other television scene. Big Bird is struggling with the concept of the death of someone close to him, much like a child would. Story 56. When Will asks his dad, "How come he doesn't want me, man? Comedy show or not?" That scene shattered everyone. Story 57. When Emily Osment overdosed and died in front of her mother, I think it was just before Marjorie's wedding. That scene in the church where they try to console each other and Marjorie is angry that they did not tell her until afterward. Story 58. A couple of comments on the How I Met Your Mother episode about Marshall's father's death. Another one that gets me is the episode in which Robin cannot have children. Story 59. Saved by the Bell. Jesse needs those caffeine pills. I am so excited and a little scared. Followed by a close second, There is No Hope with Dope, by National Broadcasting Company executive Brandon Tartikoff. Story 60. Tom Hanks chugged a bottle of vanilla extract in Family Ties. Story 61. When John Ritter died, they wrote his death into 8 simple rules. Story 62. The Abyssinia Henry episode of Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, in which Henry Blake is leaving to go home, was an emotional yet joyful send-off until they received word that his helicopter had gone down. I was wrecked. Story 63. Dr. Green's death, the song playing on the beach, and the letter that the entire staff read to find out. Story 64. Corporal Radar O'Reilly reported to the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital that Colonel Henry Blake's plane had been shot down and that there were no survivors. Damn, that was so well done. It was a tearjerker. Story 65. In Family Guy, Brian and Stewie go to the bank because Brian wants to commit suicide with a gun he has stored there. Story 66. Charlie Kelly breaks down while carrying his dad's body in the rain. His voice cracks when he says, "You were supposed to carry me. I needed you." Turns me into a baby every time I hear it. Story 67. That episode of Scrubs and that episode of Futurama. Story 68. Dudley was molested by the man at the bike shop on Different Strokes. It messed me up as a kid. I still think about that episode a lot. Story 69. The Gordon Jump episode of Different Strokes traumatized Generation Zers. especially since the series was such a cutting-edge comedy for its time. Story 70, Good Times. When Janet Jackson was a child, she was beaten by her mother. Story 71. In the Roseanne episode where they discover that Jackie's boyfriend is physically abusing her, Dan goes to confront him. The boyfriend did not even protest when police officers arrested him afterward because he stood by what he had done. Story 72. Scrubs. The episode where Ben dies focuses on Dr. Cox and his brother-in-law. The twist ending hit hard. Story 73. In Archer, when Jessica Walter died, the writers framed it as Mallory retiring. The episode ends with Mallory on the beach watching the sunset, reunited and holding hands with her estranged husband Ron, who had been written off the show a couple of years earlier. Notably, Ron was voiced by Ron Liebman, Jessica Walter's real-life husband of more than 30 years, who had died just over a year earlier. Story 74. Dating myself, but here are two from the 1970s. On All in the Family, after Edith died, Archie is home in his bedroom and sees her slippers under the bed. He starts to cry and says that he was supposed to be the one who went first. I got all choked up. On Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, when Radar O'Reilly comes into the operating room to read a report that Henry Blake's helicopter was hit by enemy fire and crashed, there were no survivors. Radar's voice said it all. Story 75. Titus, we cheated on each other and no one can take that away from us. Story 76. The Adventure Time scene when Marceline and the Ice King sing Remember Me gutted me as a kid because I felt like I was losing myself to mental illness, and it still affects me as an adult because it reminds me of watching an elderly loved one lose cognition. Leaves from the Vine in Avatar. The Last Airbender is also a standout. I think those count as comedies, right? Story 77. Uncle Phil consoled Will after his father left. I can relate. Story 78. Blanche from the Golden Girls was in an emotionally abusive relationship and could not see it. It was not until Dorothy confronted the man and he put his hands on her in front of Blanche and Sophia that the truth became clear. That scene has always stuck with me. Story 79. The Brendan Fraser episode of Scrubs and the Rabies episode. Story 80. The last episode of the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital encapsulated the cost of war on the human psyche. Absolutely heartbreaking. Story 81. Not as serious as some of these, but Sheldon's Nobel Prize acceptance speech brings a tear every time. Story 82. Bart writing I really miss you, Miss K. On the chalkboard. Story 83. Lisa Pantusso, look, Daddy, I'm not dumb. I know Roy is abrasive, insensitive, and probably only marrying me to get the Pennsylvania territory. Ernie Coach Pantusso, why would you want to marry a man like that? Lisa Pantusso, isn't it obvious to you? Ernie Coach Pantusso, nothing's ever obvious to me. Lisa Pantusso, Daddy, don't make me say this. Ernie Coach Pantusso, what? Lisa Pantusso, I want to be married and have children. Roy is the first man who ever asked me to marry him, and I'm afraid he'll be the last. Ernie Coach Pantusso, oh come on, honey. There must have been dozens of young fellas who proposed to you. Lisa Pantusso, no, Daddy. Wake up. Roy is the first one, ever. Ernie Coach Pantusso, but you're so beautiful. Lisa Pantusso, beautiful? Daddy, you've been saying I'm beautiful since I was a very little girl. But look at me not as my father, but as if you were seeing me for the first time. Please try to see me as I really am. Ernie Coach Pantusso, after looking deep into Lisa's eyes. Oh my God. I didn't realize how much you look like your mother. Lisa Pantusso, I know. I look exactly like her, and Mom was not comfortable about her beauty. Ernie Coach Pantusso, but that's what made her more beautiful. Your mother grew more beautiful every day of her life. Lisa Pantusso, she was really beautiful. Ernie Coach Pantusso, yes, and so are you. You're the most beautiful kid in the whole world. Lisa Pantusso, thanks, Daddy. Story 84. If you have not heard of the series A Very Special Episode, watch one. You will be hooked. You can find the episodes on YouTube. The show examines popular 1990s comedies, selects an episode that conveyed a special message about drugs, alcohol, and so on, and then provides a hilarious recap. Story 85, Shorzy when he takes that final hit on the ice and can't go anymore. Story 86. More recently, Wilson the dog dies in Friday Night Dinner. In real life, the dog actor was retiring, so the writers included Wilson's death in the show. It is an odd sequence in a hilarious comedy. Story 87. You were supposed to carry me. I shouldn't have to carry you up myself. Story 88. Family Ties. When a young Tom Hanks slapped Michael J. Fox. Story 89. Mindy's grandmother speaking through Mork while he rocks in a rocking chair was powerful material for a sitcom in the 1980s. Story 90. George's death in that Scrubs episode really hit me hard as a teen. You can joke about it and focus on your own life, but others around you may not have that luxury. The music by Death Cab for Cutie made it even sadder. Story 91. Only Fools and Horses. Rodney's wedding reception. As he and Cassandra are leaving, the look between Rodney and Dell is just magic. Story 92. The very last episode of Still Game. Jack and Victor, both old, slowly walk up the hill, fading away and saying, "They'll know where we went." Then it cuts to the other older characters fading away one by one. The final moment is Bobby the barman turning around, looking into the camera as it moves into the pub, and saying, "Well, look who it is, me." Story 93. Brooklyn Nine-Nine had so many unexpected serious moments. For example, there was an episode about women's struggles with sexual assault not being taken seriously, and another where Terry was profiled and arrested for being a black man. I did not expect that tone when I started the series. Story 94. Henry Blake. If you are old enough, you already know. Story 95. In Ted Lasso, when Roy walked over to hug Jamie after his abusive father left the locker room. Story 96. Does Buffy the Vampire Slayer count as a comedy? The entire episode The Body was the biggest punch in the gut I have ever gotten from an hour of television. Story 97. The cast going over the top in the last episode of Blackadder was absolutely heartbreaking. Story 98. The final episode of Blackadder Season 4 is set in World War I and ends with the soldiers being sent over the top of the trenches. A very real and foolish tactic that resulted in heavy losses and no forward progress. The episode concludes as they go over the top, leaving the viewer wondering whether the characters survive. I have always found it hits hard, no doubt intentionally, and it contrasts sharply with the rest of the series. Story 99. Dr. Cox's breakdown in Scrubs always hits the right notes with me. Lieutenant Colonel Blake's plane being shot down, or the "it was a baby" moment from Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, also hit hard the first time you see it. Story 100. The scene in The Big Bang Theory in which Howard learns that his mother has died felt very realistic. His reaction and those of his friends were especially convincing. Story 101. We learned that Colonel Henry Blake's helicopter was shot down and there were no survivors. Story 102. All in the Family. Edith is raped by an intruder upstairs. Archie consoles her. Her voice changes when she recounts the ordeal, which she can barely speak of. An amazing actress. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.